have previously reviewed everything that will come handy in understanding the studies of this anatomy discipline. And now we are following with the essence, the core, the matter of this book, with this study of this discipline. And we're gonna follow up with the first chapter, and this is gonna be the thorax. We're gonna be analyzing thoracic walls, pleura and lungs, breast, heart and great vessels, as well thoracic cavity and viscera. Let us continue with it, and let us see how everything goes. The thorax is superior part of the trunk between the neck and the abdomen. It's formed by 12 pairs of ribs, sternum, costal cartilage, and 12 thoracic vertebrae. Forming the thoracic cage, which surrounds the thoracic cavity, supports the girdle, and along with the skin, fascia, muscles, the thoracic cage forms the thoracic wall, lodging and protecting the content of thoracic cavity. For example, the heart, the lungs, as well some abdominal organs such liver, etc., etc. This thoracic cage provides attachment for muscles of the neck, upper limbs, abdomen, and back. The muscle of the thorax elevate and depress the thoracic cage during breathing. The heart, trachea, lungs, great vessels, and the thoracic wall itself are constantly moving the thorax in the human body. Until now, in your atlas, take a look at the skeleton of the thorax, the anterior part and the posterior part. The thoracic wall cage is covered by skin, fascia, muscles, including attachments to pectoral girdle, to the upper limb and trunk, the mammary glands of the breast, or subcutaneous tissue. The function of the thoracic wall protects the contents of the thoracic cavity and provides function of breathing. The fascia of the thoracic wall is subcutaneous tissue composed of loose, irregular connective tissue beneath the skin is attached to the skin. The skin ligaments, the retinacular cutis contains fat, sweat glands, blood, lymphatic vessels, cutaneous nerves. The deep fascia is a thin fibrous membrane, dense and loosely attached to the subcutaneous tissue and overlying skin, forming the epimysium, connective tissue envelope. The deep fascia invests the muscle and associated tendons to their attachments to bones as ribs attached to the periosteum of the bones. And the deep fascia helps hold the parts of the thorax together and presents a barrier to infection. The skeleton of the thoracic wall. The thoracic skeleton forms the osteocartilaginous thoracic cage, which protects thoracic viscera and some abdominal organs. Includes 12 pairs of ribs and costal cartilage. The sternum. The ribs, the costal cartilage form large part of the thoracic cage. 12 thoracic vertebrae and vertebra 4 discs. Ribs and costal cartilages. They're light in weight, has a spongy interior containing bone marrow that forms blood cells. And there are 3 types of ribs: true, false, floating. True ribs are the first 7 ribs attached directly to the sternum through their own costal cartilage. The false ribs, the 8th to 10th rib, their cartilage are joined to that of the rib immediately superior to them. Their connections with the sternum is indirect. Floating ribs, the 11th and 12th ribs. The rudimentary cartilage of these ribs do not connect even indirectly with the sternum. They end posterior abdominal musculature. Typical ribs, the 3rd to 9th, have a head is wedge-shaped, has 2 facets separated by crest of the head, 1 facet for articulation with numerically corresponding vertebrae, 1 facet for the vertebra superior to it. Neck connects the head with the body at the level of the tubercle. Tubercle, the junction of the neck and shaft. Tubercle, a smooth articular part articulating the corresponding transverse process of the vertebra. A rough, non-articular part of the costotransverse ligament. The shaft is thin, flat, curved at the costal angle, where the rib turns anterolaterally. Concave internal surface, has costal groove, protects the intercostal nerve and vessels. Atypical ribs, the 1st, the 2nd, the 10th to 12th are dissimilar. The 1st rib is broadest, shortest, sharply curved, 7 through ribs. A single face on its head for articulation with T1 vertebra and two transversely directed grooves crossing its superior surface for the subclavian vessel, separated by scalene tubercle and ridge. The second rib is thinner. The shaft is typical, less curved, longer than the first rib, has two facets, the head for articulation with the bodies of T1 and T2 vertebrae, and a tubercle for muscle attachment. The 10th and the 12th ribs have only one facet on their heads. The 11th and 12th ribs are short, have no necks or tubercles. Costal cartilage. Prolong the ribs anteriorly. Has the elasticity of the thoracic wall. Cartilage increase in length through the first 7 and then gradually increase. Then gradually decrease. The first 7 cartilages, sometimes the 8th, join the sternum. The 8th, the 9th, and 10th articulate with a cartilage just superior to them. In some people, the 10th pair might be floating. The 11th, the 12th cartilage form caps on the anterior ends of these ribs. Intercostal spaces separate the ribs and their costal cartilages from one to another. Spaces occupied by intercostal muscles, vessels, and nerves. In your atlas, please check the figures of typical ribs and atypical ribs, please. Thoracic vertebrae. Thoracic vertebrae are typical. They have vertebral arches, neural arches, and 7 processes for muscular and articular connections, and includes costal facet for articulation with the head of ribs, costal facet, transverse processes for articulation with the tubercles of ribs, except for the inferior 2 or 3 thoracic vertebrae. Long spinous processes. 2 demifacets or costal facets. Small plane surfaces on each side of the 4 discs between 2 adjacent vertebrae that articulate with a rib, located laterally of T2 through T9 vertebrae. The superior demiface at the superior posterolateral margin of vertebral body articulates with the head of its own rib. The inferior demifacet in posterolaterally and inferiorly on vertebral body articulates with the head of rib inferior to it. The T1 has a single facet for the head of the first rib and a demifacet from the cranial part of the second rib. Until this part, take a look in your atlas, the figures of typical thoracic vertebrae. Please. T10 has only one costal facet. It's partially on its body, partially on its pedicle. The T11 and T12 have only a single costal face, which is on their pedicle. The spinous processes projecting from vertebral arches of typical thoracic vertebrae are long and slope inferiorly. They cover the intervals between the laminae of adjacent vertebrae, preventing sharp objects from entering the vertebral canal. The sternum is a flat, elongated bone, forms the middle of the anterior part of the thoracic cage, consists of three parts: manubrium, body, hyphoid process. The manubrium, like the handle of a sword, is a roughly triangular bone, lies at the level of the bodies of T3 and T4 vertebrae. Is thickest of the three parts of the sternum. Easily palpated, concave center of the superior border of the manubrium is the jugular notch. This notch is deepened in an articulated skeleton by the medial ends of the clavicles. Large, forming the sternoclavicular joints. Inferolateral to the clavicular notch, the costal cartilage of the first rib fuses at the lateral border of the manubrium, and sternocostal synchondrosis of the first rib, superior and inferior to the manubrial joint. The manubrium and body lie in slightly different planes. The body of the sternum, longer, narrower, thinner than manubrium, locates at level of T5 through T9 vertebrae. Its width varies because scalloping of its lateral borders by costal notches. The hyphoid process, the smallest variable part of the sternum, thin, elongated, lies at level of T10 vertebrae, pointed, might be blunt, bifid, curved, or deflected to one side or anteriorly. The hyphoid process is an important landmark in the median plane.